Maybe y'all saw the news out of Nebraska today. Apparently, our entire state is going to go bankrupt in 2 quarters. Me and my husband owned a cattle ranch here, and I can confirm that all of the cattle ranchers here overwhelmingly voted for Trump. We support him. We voted for him. Something like 70% of our entire workforce is undocumented immigrants, and they straight up are not showing up for work anymore. They have all either fled the country, fled the state. They don't want to get raided while at work, so they have just moved on to work somewhere else. And straight up, we are going to go bankrupt now. We are going to go bankrupt. And, yeah, we voted. We knew that the immigrants would get deported and he was coming after immigrants, yet we still voted for it. Overwhelmingly voted for our own demise. I was talking to my husband last night, and I have to admit that it seems a bit foolish now when you think about it like that we voted for something that is now putting us directly out of business.
I might lose my farm because of the government. We are possibly going to lose our farm if NRCS doesn't hold up their contract with us on the EQIP program. Because of the executive orders, there's a pause or a freeze on the funding through the Inflation Reduction Act.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. On the floor. Because there's no people to come and pick this. Look at all that. Look at all that.
So this morning I ended up on Nebraska Talk, and it was a bunch of people crying, why does anybody care about Nebraska? When we voted for Kamala Harris, when I cast my vote for Harris, that was me saying, I care about you and I want you to survive and thrive. Okay, you knew better than anybody else that your state thrives and survives off of migrants' backs. Okay, and instead of them waiting for ICE to come, they decided to peace out before they could come and get them. I don't know what to tell you guys anymore. This is what you voted for. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, this is exactly what you voted for. And now you're feeling it. What do you want us to do? You want a government handout? That's socialism. You voted against that. No. Sadly, the reality is that you'll probably have to sell a lot of your farms for pennies on the dollar to large corporations and manufacturers. But don't worry, they'll probably let you work there for minimum wage.
Donald Trump has already wrecked the U.S. economy. What's happening right now across the country is that foreign workers, who of course are not documented, they're terrified of being deported, they have decided to not show up to work, which according to farmers across the country is resulting in a massive issue because there's nobody to do the work. In California specifically, it is the peak of citrus harvesting season, and unfortunately, a lot of the workers that they hire, again, undocumented workers, are simply not showing up. So there's nobody to pick the citrus, and it's just sitting out there in the fields, and they're warning now that this could very quickly lead to a massive shortage across the country. But again, it's not just citrus farmers in California. This is the entire agricultural industry here in the United States warning us that even though we're not seeing the raids yet, the threat of the raids have been enough to cause a worker shortage. And now that the agricultural industry is sounding the alarm bells, economists are also sounding the alarm bells, as they have been for months, telling us that we are headed towards a recession. Here's how one of them put it. You are talking about a recession-level event if this is the new long-term norm. That is from Cal State Bakersfield economics professor Richard Gerhardt.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is an interesting one, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. We are diving into the Nebraska farm crisis, how farmers' votes for Trump have come back to bite them, and why the state is facing bankruptcy in just a few months. We are going to watch some TikTok videos that will shed light in all of this, so make sure you stay tuned until the end. But before we get into it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive like this one. All right, let's set the stage. Nebraska, a state famous for its vast farmlands and booming agricultural industry, is home to some of the most fertile soil in the United States, which makes agriculture its biggest economic driver. So when Nebraska farmers overwhelmingly voted for Trump, they actually thought they were doing what was best for their industry. But fast forward to today, and it's a whole different story.
There's a little bit of good news coming out of Nebraska. I mean, if you could call it good news. They have identified a way to cut their budget shortfall pretty much in half. Now, if you haven't been paying attention to the story that's happening in Nebraska, there's a lot of panic that the state is going to go bankrupt. And there's some saying it will happen in just the matter of a couple of months because they have a $400 million budget shortfall. There's a lot of different reasons for it. Let me tell you what they are. But a lot of it very much is self-inflicted wounds. And now they're kind of dancing around going, oh my God, what did we do? Nebraska is experiencing right now at a state level what we're all about to face at a federal level. So I think it's important to pay attention there because this is what happens when you give giveaways and subsidies and tax breaks to the wealthy and you do all of these things that in the moment feel right because they get you votes and they get you popularity and they get you all this shit. And then when you have to pay the bills, you realized you've fucked yourself. And that's exactly what Nebraska has done. I think the number one reason that Nebraskans should be concerned is that they've lost their immigrant labor. Nebraska was one of those states that had there's a lot of farming, a lot of agriculture type businesses, and they use a lot of immigrant labor. Whether they're documented or not does not matter. There were people who were not native Nebraskans who had moved there and were working there. Nebraskans, like a bunch of other states, voted for Trump, which told their immigrant population, we're not welcome here. Instead of waiting for the jackboot stormtroopers from ICE to come knock on their doors, the immigrants pieced out. We're going to go someplace where people will use our labor and will like us and will treat us with a little bit of dignity. So they probably hustled their asses to Colorado or California or someplace else where they could get work and they could be safer. So rumor has it that this was 60% of their labor force. And when you lose that much of your labor force, you got no one to pick your wheat, you got no one to slaughter your cows, you're in big fucking trouble. So that's the start of it. They're not making as much revenue. They're not supplying as much food into the food chain, which, by the way, screws all of us. Our food supply is going to be fucked if this happens. So let's just say that.
Did Nebraska care about anybody else? And does Nebraska care about Nebraska? Because you see, God helps those who help themselves. And when you Nebraskans walked into the voting booth and overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump to be president, and now you're feeling the effects of that, this isn't I told you so. This is an FAFO. And I know there are Nebraskans out there that voted for Kamala Harris and did not fall into the trap of Donald Trump. Unfortunately, there were not enough of you. And now the rumors, and I'm having a hard time substantiating some of this, but the vibe that's going around is that Nebraska basically looks to be bankrupt in about 6 months because of the undocumented migrants that are being deported, or just the fact that undocumented migrants make up a large portion of their state and workforce on the farms. And they're not showing up to work because they're now afraid they're going to be deported. So Nebraskans, especially farmers in Nebraska, did you think any further than the front of your face? Did you think any further? Or were you just blinded by hate? And now people are coming out here asking, what about Nebraska? Do you guys care about Nebraska? No, I've already answered it, but the short answer is no. No, we don't.
This farmer who voted for her, who voted for Trump, who still supports them, doesn't believe that they would round up immigrants because it's an open secret that farms in this state are held up by undocumented workers.
How are they going to do that? Within 2 days, we will not have food. There will not be food anywhere.
Now look at yourself, look at stupid on camera. What do you mean you didn't think he would go through with it? Why would you vote for something you don't believe would happen? No, You just wished it wouldn't affect you. But it will. Oh, within 2 days you won't have any food, and you didn't think of that in the voting booth? This just proves that Americans voted against and not for. And how are they going to do that? By showing up in hospitals, daycares, schools, churches. This man reminds me of the fishermen who voted for the Brexit and then started crying when they lost their market. He hates his employees deeply. He said it with his whole chest and didn't even realize it.
Did you hear that? This farmer is feeling the sting of that vote, and they are not the only ones. Nebraska's economy relies heavily on agriculture. Around 25% of the state's GDP comes from the farming, and that means a lot of jobs depend on it. But the real kicker, undocumented workers were the backbone of these farms.
Want to get rid of illegal immigrants, quit eating. And that's for everybody. That's, nationwide. If you want to get rid of them, quit eating. That'll solve the problem.
But when only 5 pickers showed up this morning to harvest his sweet potatoes, farmer Keith Smith saw possible ruin, the loss of his $500,000 crop.
They're running scared because of this new law.
And you're in trouble.
I'm in trouble, bad trouble.
Smith's 200 acres need 20 pickers, mostly Mexican nationals.
There is not enough documented people here to supply that workforce.
Most of your workers are here illegally.
That's sure. If they got documentation, they got a better job working for me.
Fernando Aldeman, a Mexican national, has worked Smith's farm since 1992. Everybody's just scared.
Yeah.
Now, are you here legally? No.
No.
So, are you scared?
Yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared,
Smith's pickers make about $100 a day. He supports immigration laws, just not this one that threatens his third-generation family.
Many of the farm workers who kept the wheels turning in Nebraska agriculture industry were undocumented immigrants. And when Trump came into power, cracking down on immigration and pushing policies that threatened deportation, a significant portion of that workforce disappeared. And now, Nebraska farmers are feeling the impact. Talk about a disaster. Can you imagine putting in all that work, all that investment, only to have your crops go to waste because you can't find workers to pick them? That's exactly what's happening right now in Nebraska. With farmers fleeing the state to avoid deportation, the labor shortage is crippling the economy. And it gets worse. Nebraska is on the brink of bankruptcy. Local governments, businesses, and farmers are staring down the barrel of an economic collapse. And if things don't change soon, the state will have to declare bankruptcy in just a few months. Now, let's get this straight. Nebraska isn't just facing a labor shortage. The Trump administration's policies led to other financial strains. Take the trade war, for instance, especially with China. Nebraska farmers were hit hard by the tariffs, which made it more expensive to export crops. So while they were facing mounting losses in the international markets, they also found themselves short-staffed and unable to maximize profits at home. And now with the immigration policies driving out the workers, they need to stay afloat. Nebraska farmers are in panic. Many of them are now realizing that they shot themselves in the foot by supporting a policy that hurt the very workers who made their businesses possible.
So you want to deport everyone, huh? In 2011, North Carolina needed 6,500 farm workers. Only 268 legal Americans applied. 245 were hired, but only 163 showed up to the first day. Worse, only 7 lasted till the end of the growing season. Migrant workers aren't taking your jobs. They're doing the jobs you would never do. And while they're doing that, they're paying taxes into Social Security, which they will never get back. And you want to deport them all. Have fun working on the farm.
Look at that. Farmers in Nebraska are finally waking up and realizing that they need immigrant labor to keep their farms alive. But it's a little too late. The workers they once relied on have moved on, and now Nebraska is facing a labor crisis of epic proportions. And here is the thing. Nebraska isn't alone. Many other farming states across the country are experiencing similar issues.
Last week, we reported on an operation involving immigration agents down in Kern County. Now, the California Farm Bureau says migrant farm workers aren't showing up for work, and that could threaten our upcoming citrus prices.
It's the peak of the citrus harvest season in Kern County right now, but the industry is taking a hit after immigration agents conducted several operations last week targeting undocumented immigrants with criminal records. The California Farm Bureau reports that the action made some ag workers too afraid to show up for work, bringing the area's citrus harvest to a virtual halt. The Monterey County Farm Bureau says it is keeping a close eye on the developments in the Central Valley. Harvest season in the Salinas Valley begins in late April. The Farm Bureau says just the threat of deportations could be enough to deter many of the 55,000 migrant workers the valley needs to operate during harvest season. The Farm Bureau says that could lead to higher food prices. The Farm Bureau joined Monterey County leaders on Wednesday to pledge to do what they can to protect workers and their families.
But Nebraska, they are really on the edge.
So the farmers in America, they lost all their workers because they got deported. And then they voted for Trump. And then they lost a lot of the grants because this guy Musk has been, cleaning out and he's taking from the poor. The farmers can't pay their bills. They're having to sell. And J.D. Vance set up a company so that he could buy farms. They're buying all the farms in America, just like they did with all the private houses. Oh, you guys are so smart. You're brilliant.
It's not just the small farmers who are feeling it either. Major agricultural businesses in Nebraska are also going bankrupt, and that's trickling down to smaller operations. The state is heading towards an economic collapse, and it's hard to say how long they can hold on. So what's the moral of the story here? Well, it's pretty clear. When you make decisions based on short-term promises without thinking about the long-term consequences, things can go south real quick. Nebraska farmers are learning that the hard way. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about the situation? Are Nebraska farmers getting what they deserve, or is this just an unfortunate consequence of bad policies? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. So YouTube thinks you will like this video over here. Don't forget to like this video if you found it interesting and share it with someone who needs to see how voting for Trump has impacted Nebraska farmers. And of course, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into stories like this. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. Au revoir.